Not singing is for pansies. On this episode, I interviewed Tim Bushong on rock and roll, manly worship, and using your talents for God's glory. So join me as we build, fight, protect, and lead. This is The Patriarchy.
Rise up, O men of God, have done with lesser.
Rise up, O men of God, have done with lesser things. Give heart and mind and soul and strength and serve the King of Kings. Lift high the cross of Christ, tread where his feet have trod. As brothers of the Son of Man, rise up, O men of God.
The Lord your God is in your midst, a victorious warrior. He will exult over you with joy. He will be quiet in his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. That was Zephaniah 3:17, and you are listening to the Patriarchy Podcast on Round Table Media, a ministry of Sovereign King Church. I am your host, Joseph Randall Spurgeon, pastor of Sovereign King Church. Speaking of church, actually, this past week, we had a woman show up after the service and asked to speak to the minister. And so, they found me and I came and talked to her. She looked to be about in her 20s, blonde woman. And so she says, well, how much does it cost to rent a church singing group? And so I looked at her and thought, do you mean a choir? And she said, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. How much does it cost to acquire a church singing group? As I said at the beginning, this week I'm actually privileged to be able to interview Pastor Tim Bushong. He is the one who wrote and recorded, produced our intro song for the Patriarchy Podcast, and he's a good friend of mine. He's done some conferences every year called Jesus and Politics. He's pastor in northern Indiana. But I interviewed him. We talked about his work. He used to be in some Christian rock bands that were pretty big during the 90s. In fact, you're going to hear a story about how I probably saw him when I was a teenager. And so one of the things I did want to mention about this is that we recorded this using Zoom. And so if you're watching this podcast, you're going to see a difference between the camera quality between what you're seeing now and when it comes to the interview. Since the interview, I've upgraded the camera, I've upgraded my computer, and I've upgraded the software that we're using to record the interview. So hopefully from here on out, video quality will be much better. But even with the lesser video quality, I think you're going to really enjoy this interview. I had a good time interviewing Tim Bushong, and he's just a fun man to be around. I think you're going to be encouraged and strengthened as a man to use your talents, whatever they are, for God's glory. So take a listen. Good afternoon. You're listening to the Patriarchy Podcast. I am Pastor Joseph Spurgeon. I have with me here today Pastor Tim Bushong. Tim spent many years in Christian music ministry and then 11 years as one of the founders and pastors of Trinity Evangelical Church in Larwell, Indiana.
Which is now Trinity Reformed in South Whitley, Indiana.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
You've been married to your wife, Heidi, for 39 years. Is it still 39 years?
Yeah, June 11th of this year will be 40.
Oh, wow. Big.
Wow.
You got something big planned, don't you?
Oh, man, I'm going to supersize her order.
And then you got 3 children, 5 grandchildren.
Yep.
And you're a lifetime resident of Syracuse.
That's me.
And you are a pastor of Syracuse Baptist Church.
Yes.
But you're also you're tri-vocational.
Yeah, which it means I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up.
What what are you tri-vocational about?
Well, of course, now pastoral ministry takes up the bulk of my time. But for years, actually since the summer of '86, I've been a piano tuner, technician, That helped me support my family when I was on the road in Christian music. And then when I got off the road, I turned all of that into what we call the other side of the glass, which is the rest of the recording studio, the drum room, all this equipment and gear and everything. And that's when I was able to really, get on the ball as far as recording music and doing that for a living. And I was real busy for about 8-9 years here in the studio, just swamped every Saturday.
Now, you were professionally before all this, like you said, you spent a lot of time on the road and in a band. So our listeners actually may know you, recognize you from your work doing the theme song of the Patriarchy podcast.
yeah, that's one of my.
That's your claim to fame, right?
That's it. Now I've done. So I get recognized on an elevator for doing the Radio Free Geneva, Mighty Fortress. Now John Harris's bump music. I took his riff and just put a band to it and played it myself. And then I did a song for Cy Ten Bruggencate on answering Matt Walsh, and that was kind of a metal mayhem. And then when you guys were doing your thing, I was like, man, we got to do this song and do it kind of manly. I'll tell you something funny. When I was trying to do the soft, weaker Chris Tomlin intro, I couldn't get it. I should have hired that done and then come in with "Rise Up," Anyway, so yeah, and I do really, to be honest, I do almost all of this podcast bump stuff for free. Almost. Lately, it's been involving a little more time, and there's one going to come out from Europe, believe it or not. Our friend from Germany, Pastor. So that'll be cool. Different version of Psalm 2.
All right.
Yep.
Well, you've also put out a couple albums, I guess, or is it just one recently, or you had two of them, right?
Well, the one that's under my name, Tim Bushong and Friends, that's Battle Hymns for Weary Souls, and I thank Michael Foster for that album title. I mean, he came up with that out of the blue. And working on Volume 2, and then I've got all my old music from Christian rock era is up on Spotify, and those are basically two different bands. There's Love War, that's one word, and the Channel Surfers, which I think you were a little familiar with the Channel Surfers. Is that right?
Yeah. They I remember them back in the 90s.
Yeah, late 90s.
90s, yeah. That was in my youth group upbringing. Yeah.
Hey, so, glad to have been of service, Joe.
So you and I met through a conference with some people in my presbytery have done, and we've developed a good friendship. In fact, you've had me come up, what now, three years for
this will be your third year coming up to speak at Jesus in Politics. Dude, have you checked out the lineup?
Yeah, why don't you give a quick
It's exactly the same as last year, except we're adding William Wolfe and John Moody. And y'all are from the Louisville area. All three of you guys. The guy coming the farthest is John Harris, and then I'm speaking as well. So I think it's going to be a good conference. There's a whole lot of craziness going on these days, and Jesus as King. The subtitle, the necessity of Christianity for a free people. That's where I'm at. So yeah, I was so glad to have you come up that first year, and after that, it was like, well, hey, it would be a crime, a sin not to invite Joe back.
All right. Well, each year I come and I try to preach something and see if they won't bring me back, but we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
No, right. I would thoroughly enjoy it. Well,
yeah, it's cool.
You recently recorded a version of Psalm 110.
Right hand, the Lord to my Lord did command, I'll send your mighty rod from Zion till the mount of God to smite your foes until they break. The throne among them you must take. Hail to Jesus Christ is reigning. All will bow and all will name him Jesus, King of kings. Upon your head a crown of dew, your mourning makes the old things new, and all who see your holy vow will bow before you in that hour. Hail to Jesus Christ is reigning. All will bow and all will name him Jesus, King of kings. Melchizedek, a king priest, in you his light is now increased. Your life the offering that you gave. The price was paid, you left the grave. Hail to Jesus Christ is reigning. All will bow and all will name him Jesus, King of kings. The kings who fight against my Lord shall taste his wrath and meet his sword. Upon their corpses he will look, then drink to vengeance from abroad. Hail to Jesus Christ is reigning. All will bow and all will name him Jesus, King of kings. Hail to Jesus Christ is reigning. All will bow and all will name him Jesus, King of
All
So
right, what-
Psalm 110. We just heard it, I think. Hail to Jesus. That came about kind of through necessity. No offense to anyone who's ever come up with a version of that psalm before. Maybe I just didn't hear it and wasn't aware of it. But I told our congregation, man, it was over a year ago even. I said, I really like Psalm 110. It was so central to my teaching on eschatology. You know, how many times does Psalm 110 come into the picture in the New Testament? You know, and I said I really would like a manly version. I literally said the word manly from the pulpit. Can you believe that? Manly,
yeah.
convicting version of that song. And it was only maybe 4 days later that Brianna Smith emailed and said, well, I came up with these verses. And I was just blown away. I'm like, oh, wow, this is really good. I think I changed one word. It was no big deal. It was more how to flow the melody, and it didn't change the meaning at all. So she came up with the verses for Psalm 110. And it's almost like one of those things when you're a musician, you can look at the words on the paper and it just writes itself. All of a sudden you've got your meter, your melody. I knew it was going to be 6/8. It's going to be one of these, you know, one of those songs. And I said, you know, I think it could use a chorus. I think I want something to tie it all together, you know, so that there's a big, and that's where I came up with the Hail to Jesus Christ is reigning. And so I put that together last summer. That would be the summer of 2022. And then I did what I did with the Battle Hymns CD. I'm really old, I know. Album, which is now on Spotify.
On his 8-track.
Pop that in the power play. Get that 327. So what I would do is I already had the arrangement, the recording, everything's pretty much done, and no background vocals, and that's where I wanted the congregation to sing. So what we had done with battle hymns was I would record it with a click track, and then I would play that literally through these earbuds through my laptop, and then lead the congregation with an acoustic guitar. There's already acoustic on the mix, so if there's a little bleed over, I really didn't care. And I would put a couple big condenser mics out in the auditorium, and then basically do 2 takes back to back. That way, if you've got 60 people in the room, it turns into 120 because you've double tracked all those people. And that's how the congregation got involved. And then I thought, if this is going to get shared, you need a video. Well, my son's a pro videographer, works for Townsend's. They've got millions of subscribers. He knows what he's doing. And I thought, great, we can get Aaron to shoot and cut and produce and everything. So it was kind of a Sunday afternoon after fellowship meal. We went across to that one-room schoolhouse you've been in, and shot it. I think we did 5 or 6 takes, top to bottom, with everybody singing. I said, don't sing full on, but do sing, because it always looks better if you're naturally singing rather than just singing the words along. It just looks weird.
Yeah.
And then Aaron edited it and put it all together, and Bob's your uncle. We've got a few thousand views now, and people seem to like it. So
one of the things I really liked about it is the fact that your church is involved in the work, and you're getting the people of your church involved in this work. One of the reasons we moved the Patriarchy podcast from the Fight Laugh Feast network was to make sure my work is the work of the church, and that even what we're doing now is for our church and by our church, and obviously can equip other people. And
yeah.
So
I get that. It's a worthy endeavor. If you're anything you're going to do like that, and if you're a churchman, like you are, like I am, even like part of your apologetics ministry should be tied into your church. The thing we do with Eschatology Matters and those interviews and stuff, everybody in church, they're not as involved as like I am or the other guys that are on the channel, but they're very, let's just say everyone's up to speed, and the reasoning behind even doing that too. So,
yeah. So, why don't you walk? So that's where you're kind of at musically. Why don't you walk us back? How did you even get started in music in the first place?
Well, thank God I was born into a Christian household that was also very, very musical. And my dad was a music major down at Manchester College. My mom the same. In fact, when my mom moved out from Western Pennsylvania, her whole family followed. And so all of them ended up in that area of Indiana down by Manchester. Now, Manchester has gone completely and utterly wokey McWoke face. It's awful. Dad told me back then it was starting. He could tell. However, the music program was second to none. And so my dad was very, very gifted trumpet player. My mom was still is, piano player, voice teacher. And so there was all this music in the house. When the Radio Free Geneva first auditioned in summer of 2015, the first thing James White said was, I can tell you one thing right now. When I was a kid, I wouldn't have been allowed to listen to that music. And I'm like, that was my household. There was no metal, no hard rock, but we did have some soft rock. Dad liked, he liked Bread. He liked the Carpenters.
There you go. Yeah.
And there was an awful lot of Southern gospel music, which may explain my aversion to that style now. But there was a lot of big band and jazz and just all kinds of music. And we were always encouraged to play something. I didn't like the piano, I think mostly because of the associations that the piano had with the men that I knew that played piano. Let's just leave it there. It was just soft and weak and flowery. And this is the late 60s, early 70s. I was born in 60. Mm-hmm. My mom even told me recently, she says, yeah, those arrangements they're not, it's just not quality music. It's kind of fluffy. And so when I heard rock and roll, well, the first ones, I think I bought the 45 for Taking Care of Business by BTO, Get to the Workout. That's a great song. And then I heard a little band from England called Black Sabbath. And that distorted, tough, working class buzzsaw, that just got it for me. I thought this is the cat's pajamas right here. This guitar sound, which is, it kind of has this, well, let's demonstrate real quick, shall we?
Yeah.
Well, I did happen to plug my Les Paul in, and a Les Paul through a normal, like an old Fender amp. Caught in a trap. I can't walk down. Or rockabilly. But when you turn it up, it's a completely different animal. And that's where my
be excellent to each other.
Dude, you're not gonna believe this. I quoted Bill and Ted during my sermon just last week.
Oh wow.
And it went like this. I said, I'm sorry, I'm done with that. So for me in high school, Northern Indiana, it's the 70s, all that kind of strutty, very testosterone driven music. I'll say that. That's one of the things I think is sometimes I'm not getting in modern, even heavy music. It just doesn't have that strut factor, which in some ways is good because it is kind of weirdly sexual. But I just really liked how the guitar sounded, how you could do all manner of different things with it. And with the tones, you could pretty much swallow the stage in all-encompassing guitar. Then you buttress that with the drum kit and the bass, and you're in hard rock land. So I did that for a long time. I had a band in high school, played junior proms and dances and things like this. This is before the DJs were ubiquitous and a lot cheaper than a band. And then through the 80s, I had a band, always had a band going. I was going to be a rock star. It's like Mr. Drysdale on Beverly Hillbillies, Miss Hathaway, Jethro wants to be a brain surgeon or a rock star or a double knot spy. He'll take either one.
Yeah.
Met my wife in very early 82. We were married in 83. She actually ran the light show for us and sang background vocals from the light board, which was, nobody was doing that. Now people do it. And it was around 1986. We were on the road with my band Rock Sedan. And, having been raised in the church, I knew I was going to have to make a choice at some point, either with God or with the world, because let's face it, trying to get a record deal in a pagan rock band is of the world. And it was about a year after that, I was just a miserable, get off the fence. I couldn't be a pagan because I knew it wasn't true, but I knew being a Christian meant giving up my autonomy. And God did a work in my heart, praise him for it. And that was May of 87. And I just put music down for a while. I thought, this has been my life. It's almost like an idol. Let's just not do it now. Let's get discipled and learn the Bible. My wife committed her life to Christ not even a year after that. It was probably April of 88. And then I started writing songs again and found some guys to play with. That turned into Love War. That turned into a record deal with John Adino Elefante. And then that band eventually, through the early mid-90s, morphed into the Channel Surfers. And that was an awful lot of fun. And we played. Like Michael Foster just shakes his head. I can't believe I saw you at Kings Island, when he was a kid, right?
I think I may have seen you there too. We were all three there and didn't know each other.
Exactly. Right. Oh, I love it when that happens. We were on family vacation one time. It was probably 10 years ago in Florida. And we just, hey, let's go get some drinks. And we're on the beach out in the middle of nowhere. And this guy in the booth says, hey, didn't you play at Kings Island in Cincinnati? And I'm like, and my friends were like, oh, this is stupid. This is ridiculous. So I get recognized sometimes for, it depends, different stuff. And that's fine. So
something you said I wanted to come back on real quick, though.
sure.
I wanted to ask you about, because I found this principle in my life as well. So I too grew up with not being allowed to listen to certain music, but given a wide variety of music to like, Southern gospel being one of them, jazz, all the things you said.
Yeah.
Right. And then I kind of, in my teenager years, kind of got rebellious a little bit. I really wanted to I got in a rock band. My stuff was a band called Oasis, and that's what I heard and all that. And then some electronic music was really what I got into. But I found that, so I really wanted to pursue this with all that I had, put a lot of time and effort and energy into it. I kind of ran from God's call in my life. And then when he called me out, I had to put it aside, kind of like what you said.
Yeah.
And yet then I found when I did that, and I actually gave myself to serving God, that a lot of the things that I had been searching for got put back in their right place.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to enjoy using those things. So I didn't go off and become a contemporary. I didn't play at Kings Island or anything, but some of the skills and things that I was developing, being in a band, a DJ, actually was that for a while too, have come back around, and now I get to use them for God's glory, even as a pastor. And so I think there's a principle there of, when you chase after idols, the things of this world, you don't get them.
Yeah.
They crumble in your hands, right?
That's right. That's right. But what you thought you were after is not that, and then it turns into something completely other. Yeah.
And then when you give yourself to following God, you often get the thing that you were after, but in the better way.
Amen. That is exactly right. Yep. Yeah.
So anyways, you just made me think of that. Continue where you're at. I didn't want to sidetrack you.
That's real good, because so back up to the early 90s, and I'm writing all this music and trying to, let's see if anyone is interested in this. And yeah, sure enough, someone was. And, one of the things my grandma Bushong, who passed away in 2000, but she had said, even back in the 80s, before I repented of my sins, she said she was convinced that the experiences I was having on the road, still in a sinful lifestyle, more just plain old drugs and rock and roll. I was married and just faithful. Let's say that, right? That wasn't part of it. But she said those experiences in organization, leading a group of guys to show up at the right place at the right time, be on stage, execute well, and continue to grow that. She goes, that's all the working with people. God's going to use that. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe, Grandma, I don't know. And I think she's right. It's a different skill set. I think it's related to some of what some of our friends talk about with ministering to, especially working class men, blue collar men. You wouldn't think that being in a hard rock band and touring is that, like a garage mechanic. Let me tell you, you only see the band that 90 minutes on stage. The whole rest of the time is work and some boredom and fatigue and just strategy and having to go into town half hour back where you came from just to get the right wrench to fix the valves that are banging up against the, it's work.
You got to be a mechanic. You got to fix the van that you're driving around.
You got to know, or you're stuck, man. And then in just dealing with other human beings, and again, I'm older, but I didn't spend as many years in pastoral ministry as well. When you get to be my age, you'll have 35 years under your belt, maybe more, And so all that wisdom accrues in working with people. And like you said, the thing that you thought was the brass ring is not the brass ring. Christ is it. You run after Jesus, you run after godliness and holiness and pursue that. And perhaps God in his mercy, wisdom, as he sees fit, maybe he'll let you do that again and do it for his name and not for your own. And I think that's a good principle. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, another thing that that you said, and it remind me again about what my dad did, your parents did, was the set limits on certain things that I could listen, but then they introduced me to this wide variety of stuff, and I think that's actually been helpful too. Again, even as a pastor, of I run into a lot of people that I don't know, they grow up and they only listen to like country music, they only listen to this one thing, and they don't have any. But as a pastor, or I even think just as a Christian in general, it is good to have a wide variety of knowledge of arts and music and culture,
Yeah.
because you're going to be relating to people, and you just find like I find classical music helpful just as I do sometimes like quoting a hip hop song or something.
Oh yeah. I was talking to Heidi last night about that. We were driving home from our grandkids, and it was like, okay, it's really beneficial to have a library of material back in your head. For me, I had to overcome some bong resonant hops that were still rattling around there, but God's been very merciful to me in that. And whether it's literary quotes that are pithy and appropriate, aphorisms, songs. It's one thing to be the pastor in those big churches that they'll do a whole series on a movie and how this is the gospel, and I just cringe at that. It's a different thing to quote, "Oh brother, where art thou?" and say, "Well, come on in, boys, the water is fine." We all know what that is. That's cool. Or a line from a song, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it just helps to be, I think, widely read. It doesn't mean you have to go swim in every sewer to know that they stink. Obviously, there's things that you just, that's irredeemable. We don't have anything to do with that. The one when I was talking to my dad passed away in 94, and my mom just lives around the corner basically on our property. And we were talking about that whole piano connection. And I said, things might have been different if maybe I could have listened to Fats Waller, because that's a whole different bag of piano tricks right there.
Yeah.
She said, I've never heard him. Music major? And they didn't have you listen to, there might be some racist stuff in there. I don't know. But man, that's unbelievable skill and talent. And boy, oh boy, you can't gainsay the effort and practice that goes into playing a musical instrument skillfully.
There's a benefit for that too, of if you're able to have your children learning. I have two brothers. We all grew up taking piano lessons. I would say my youngest brother was the one that actually took the lessons and did what he was supposed to do. I was the guy that, well, I like your books that you want me to learn, but let me figure out stuff and play what I want to play.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I there's actually a lesson in that my brother can actually sit down and play anything he wants now.
Yeah.
And I can't. So sometimes there's a lesson in like, get the rules down.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You remember in the mid 80s, there was David Lee Roth put together a band, and it had Steve Vai on guitar and Billy Sheehan on bass. I think Greg Bissonette on drums. I mean, you want to talk about the top level. This is the top tier of musicianship across the board. And, all the kids out there are just wanting to ape and all that. And Billy Sheehan would say, well, you really do need to learn the rules before you know how to break them correctly. And that is so key. And let's not do that with theology, okay? Because we don't want to break that.
Yeah, but we should start with the base. I mean, we ought to, like, everybody want to move to the exceptions. Like when you,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what everybody wants to do. They want to be the exception and move to the exception.
As,
And
as if Paul never said all Cretans are evil brutes, lazy gluttons, liars.
yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Paul, I know this one Cretan who's not.
yeah. Hey, I'm a Cretan. I'm not like that.
Can't believe he'd say such a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of those generalities are helpful, and I think like one of the things that back to music. One of my friends said, "Hey, if there was someone that came along who could lead the music at your church and do it with the same kind of gusto and leadership that you had, would you give up that part?" And I said, "Absolutely, yeah." Right now, I'm the guy that does. So I actually lead the singing at my church, and it's with this instrument, the acoustic guitar, which I never really liked all that much until I started playing hymns on it. That's what got me back in love with the acoustic and the strum. And then you go back, then you can go back to the 70s and revisit all that other acoustic stuff. So
Yeah.
if you take a song, let's say for example, like Psalm 2, why do the heathen nations vainly rage? And you could sing it just fine with a piano accompaniment. But as soon as you bring this guy in, why do the heathen nations vainly rage? What pride was good? It almost changes everything, because now there's more urgency to it. If I can put it in those terms. I did a music seminar one time for a friend of ours in the CREC, and it was for the men. And there had been some, just some challenges to some of the song choices and whatever. And he thought, okay, Tim can bring some sanity or whatever. So I took my guitar and we sang like 3 psalms together in the group of men. There might have been like 15 guys there. And the one guy said, "I don't understand it. That's the same melody. It's the same everything. Why does it sound so different?" I said, "Well, it's the guitar. It's adding that to the mix." And we're probably, similar background in the kind of worship wars and what's appropriate in church and that kind of thing. But, if you can literally transform the mood of an entire room by adding an instrument or taking one away, that's kind of powerful. You have to be careful with that. You can't just do that because, hey, I want to set a certain mood. I know David played for Saul. I'm right there in my year through the Bible reading. Find me somebody that can play well to calm this guy down, because he's freaking out. And David would play. I'm sure he wasn't playing the, 1,000-year BC version of Ride the Lightning or anything. It was going to be something that's calming and has a calming effect. So you do have to be careful. I like playing guitar in the hymnody though, basically because it just helps keep the whole, got piano, bass guitar, organ. Lord willing, someday we might have a drum kit up there. I don't know. Just keeps it all kind of going at a certain tempo so it doesn't slow down and drag and get kind of,
You've been kind of hinting around. Well, you've been kind of going around about something that maybe I want to ask you to help you bring it out even more.
Sure.
Is that I don't know. I've been in many churches where men don't sing, and they tend to think of music as like the woman thing to do, right? And you've been talking about like the songs you got were that really got you early were manly. You're kind of talking about this, how the guitar can change and things. Really, kind of 2 questions. What's the importance of music? If this maybe one question from the perspective of someone who's going to lead music, of making sure our music is manly in our worship, and then that's the first part. And then the second part is, what do you say to the men, is like to get them to sing, maybe even in a church where it's not as formally developed in the concept of making the music masculine. So what do you say in the 2 different things to the leaders about making, why is that important? And then second, how do men get engaged? What should they do?
So the The first one, how do you lead it in such a way that engenders that kind of urgency, manliness? What was the second
Why is
question?
that? Why is that important?
Oh,
even?
right.
So why is that important to do?
That's actually the easier of the two. That just follows that biblical principle of men lead and women follow. So a man leads his home is an inescapable concept. It's not, when I'm talking with a guy that's failing, I don't say, well, you need to start to be the leader in your household. I say, your leadership is poor and you need to improve it, brother. And here's some steps you can take to help it. You've been leading by giving up the position of leadership to the woman in the house. And that's part of the fall in Genesis 3 and all that. The principle is if you get the men and you gain their interest and you gain their trust, they know that you're not two-faced, you're not, waffling, and you do so in such a way that that honors everybody in the church, but you're geared towards, okay, guys, I want you to lead your families in worship, and on Sunday morning, I want you to lead your families in singing songs, as Charles Wesley said, lustily, with vim and vigor, and that way, all of those other folks come along. If you do the opposite thing, which I'm sorry, but Christian radio is geared towards middle-class housewives age 26 to 42, right? All that popular music that I never listened to and couldn't tell you one of the songs because I just don't care. I hate it. It's so bad.
Yeah.
You're going to go to churches. I'm going to demonstrate it, okay? This is the guys.
For our listeners who can't watch the video, he's standing up and not hardly talking. He's just mouthing the words and kind of half putting his hands. It's a very timid thing. I'm explaining for our listeners, because part of this podcast is video, but some people might be just listening.
Right. So what I did was I acted the part of a man who was uncomfortable in his own skin, standing amongst a bunch of other uncomfortable men, singing a song that you could easily transpose into the boyfriend or girlfriend motif. And it's just so nice and sweet, and it's just gay. It's so useless when we think of the battle that we're in as Christians. We're fighting the world, the flesh, and the devil. And while I will give some latitude on certain times when that might be appropriate, I think on Sunday morning you're there to worship the King. This is the Lord Jesus Christ who gave himself for your sins so that you could be reconciled to a holy God and God could be reconciled to you. Come on, let's have a little passion to it, right? The other thing, now that's so towards worship leaders, you need to make sure that the songs you're singing are in a range that's appropriate for a guy. You're familiar with the Trinity hymnal, right? The old OPC Blue Trinity, and then they made a Reformed Baptist version. I think it's because they put a different confession in the back.
I've got it right here behind me. I
got one over there. And even in that red Cantus Christi we used to use in the CREC, there's a certain range that men can sing in, and that's what you got to go to. So even like a song that's in the key of that's about as high as you go on a Sunday morning, right there. If you try to go up here, the guys can't sing that.
Yeah.
And what happens is the girls are struggling at the low level, and the guys are down here, and it gets quiet. I've seen it 100,000 times. And the worship leader is just up there basking in the glory, singing his high range, and you can't do it. It's literally impossible for a man voice unless he's a rock singer and just letting it all out, Yeah. So there's a certain range that is just appropriate for congregational singing. You can ask any musicologist; they'll tell you the same thing.
Yeah,
That's helpful.
There's a vocal range, and then you kind of said earlier there's the lyrical range, because I don't know, I think in there were probably like the 1700s. There was a lot of the way people spoke about God sometimes verged on the romantic side of things too. You can read some of the Puritans a little bit,
Yeah.
but then when you get some songs, man, like, but even then they were still rich in theology, so you could actually sing it. But like you get now, you like, I don't remember who's singing. There's just songs like "I Love the Way You Hold Me." Like,
Maybe.
it's like, what? It's like, God, I love the way you hold me. All you got to do is change the word God to boy. Boy.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. I just don't have time for that. I don't have the patience for that. I had to learn some songs for somebody, and they said, "So, did you like the music?" And I avoided the question. I said, some of it was, pretty tough, pretty. It took me a while to get the whole thing, and they caught me, and they said, "You didn't say whether you liked it or not." And I just went. I didn't even answer the question.
yeah.
Like, do I have to like it?
The weather was nice today.
I've recorded in this very room. I've recorded for 23 years, solid. There's a lot of music that, I didn't really care for, and I took their money because they want to sound good, and I tried to do a good job. That doesn't mean I have to like it. Yeah. So with hymnody, just because a hymn's old doesn't mean it's good. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's bad. Hail to Jesus is a brand new song, and I think it's fairly decent. Next is Psalm 19. We're going to try to rock that one up, do a version of that. So certain songs, I remember when I first came to Syracuse Baptist, this is middle of 2017, and I started scouring that blue 1975 Baptist hymn book, and there are songs in there just killer. Thou whose purpose is to kindle. Phenomenal songs. Brethren, we've met to worship. Bunch of stuff. There's still stuff in there I'm trying to dig out. But after about a year of that, one of the ladies came up with this sheaf of papers, and he goes, "Here, these are songs we like." And it literally said "songs we like" at the top. And I was okay. So I brought it home, and I'm like, okay, about a third of these we're already doing. Okay, that's okay. I don't know why that was included. A third of these I might consider, maybe I'll do when we all get to heaven. That's not okay. I get it. It's a little maudlin and revivalist, right? But the third page, these are songs we're never doing ever. And I'm not coming to the garden alone ever. No, ain't going to happen.
Yeah, who's Andy, anyways? He talks with us. I hope they're not. Are they talking about Andy, unhitched guy?
Oh, the unhitched guy.
Andy walks with me. Andy talks with me. Andy, whoever Andy.
That's a new. Hey, by the way, did you just heard his father passed away today or yesterday? Yeah. And boy, that's sad.
Yeah.
And anyway.
So let me throw this
Gladly the Cross-Eyed Bear. Have you ever seen this?
Yeah.
Anyway.
So let me throw this out to you. I think we agree here, the leaders ought to consider that we are gathering for worship, and it is battle that we're going out to, good, rich theology and engaging men. So what do you say to the man in the pew? Maybe he's at a church where it's a decent church. We wouldn't want to tell a man to leave just because of one little thing. But how do you encourage the man in the pew to start singing and how does he start to apply everything that we've been talking about?
Well, that could be a fairly broad category too. How does let's say you're, like you said, you don't want to leave a church just at drop of a hat, one thing, that's it, I'm done. I've been in a situation where there were definitely worldview issues that built upon themselves, where finally it got to the point, you know what? I don't think we're going to reform from within. Let's plant a church, right?
Yeah.
That happens. We all know that. With music, I don't think there would be anything inappropriate about, going to your worship leader. They call him worship pastors, so I guess he's a pastor, right? He should be. He has the title,
Mm-hmm.
and ask some good questions, and not in arrogance or trying to trip him up, but genuinely. So, is there any reason why you have to dim the house lights before we start singing? What's that for? Is there any reason why we have it looks like the Shirelles up there, 3-part girl harmony? I don't know. So some of these things are adiaphora. They can definitely be not what you want to put your stake in the ground over. But my point in those questions, I want that guy to have examined why he does what he does, and examine biblically why he chooses the songs that he does. Because we all know, growing up in this part of the country, a lot of the charismatic churches, they're up front with saying, oh, we're choosing these songs in this particular order, so that by the time you get to the end, there's a seed bed that the Holy Spirit can begin to work that anointing in the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's idolatry. I don't know what else to call that. I need this tool. I need this mood so that I can sense the presence of God. No. But at least get some of these guys, again, do unto others. If I was the guy with all the novel ideas and some guy came to me and said, hey, how come? Well, I'm probably not going to respond very nicely. But if he says, hey, Pastor Tim, I'm just curious. Is there any, what is the rationale for doing such and such or singing that song? And at least open that dialogue up. And if he ends up being stubborn, okay, that's at least you try. I think with your own families, you definitely want to engender and begin to encourage that kind of loud singing around the table. It's always kind of fun. Oh, Dad, really? Yeah, let's do it.
It's the hardest thing for a lot of people because, you and I, we both grew up with music, I think, and a lot of people didn't. And so it's awkward. You think about family worship. And one of the things I always think about is that you just got to sit down with your family and say, this is going to be awkward. We're going to do it. And if you start early enough, so some of you, maybe it's harder because your kids are teenagers, but if you start you start when they're born, it's never awkward. They just assume that everybody sings in their family.
Yeah.
And I there's nothing I love more than when I go to church and my son, I look over and I see him or my daughters singing the songs and praising. And it's not awkward to them. It's just what they do. So make it just what you do.
A couple weeks ago, we sang the song Nothing But the Blood of Jesus. And of course, that's an old call and response. Originally, it would have been the leader, what can wash away my sins? And everybody responds, nothing but the blood of Jesus. Well, I look down and there's little Mila Carlin, and she's 3.5 years old. And she doesn't know the words until we get to, she's got the biggest smile. She's looking around, nothing but the blood. Same about my granddaughter. She doesn't know the words. She'll get it. Right. And they just belled it, man, when it gets to the point. And so afterwards I went to her dad and I said, man, she knows it. She goes, yeah. She knows that song as well as a 3-year-old can know it. And she sings as well as a 3-year-old can sing it. I'll tell you what, I'm so encouraged by just recently we've experienced ridiculous church growth. I don't know what we're going to do. Kick people out. I think that's where maybe I'll preach on sovereign election and all the non-Calvinists would say, oh, I didn't know I signed up for that. I'm kidding. And what's encouraging to me though, these are young families, young dads, 25, 26 years old. They're leading their kids in family worship. they know the songs, they're learning the songs, they take the battle hymns, hymnal home, get familiar with that stuff. And get this, Sunday during the sermon, I'm in the end of Romans 9, beginning of Romans 10. And one of the dads leans over to his daughter and says, "Hey, do you know what that is? What Pastor Tim just said?" She goes, "That's imputed righteousness." I'm like, dude, put me to shame. My own, again, Daddy Tried, one of my favorite books on fatherhood from Tim Bailey. Daddy Tried. That's right. Daddy failed too. So pick yourself up and keep going. But that is so very encouraging to me. Absolutely.
Well, Tim, I think this has been an encouraging time. I've enjoyed our time just talking about music and really serving God with our with those kind of skills, and even helping men in their homes. So thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for making the theme song for us, our intro song. Any final words? Any if somebody wanted to reach out to you and get a hold of you, what do they need to do?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, and got an email address there as well. You can find me through the church website, SyracuseBaptistChurch.com, and there's an email link there. I think God is so kind to us in allowing us to use these kind of tools, the basic, the chromatic scale, the rhythms, all of that stuff. And I don't think all the great melodies have been written yet at all. I think there's much to be done. And use your gifts and talents for Christ, for His honor. And even here's the other part. I wanted to say something about this. I just talked to a dear old friend of mine, goes way back to the 80s and Christian music and all that. Certain band had apostatized and yet still likes the music. And I said, man, I can't even hardly listen to them now that they've left the faith. It's like, if I didn't know that, I probably wouldn't care as much. And he said, yeah, it's so hard to find good Christian music out there. And I said, listen, you're in your 50s. You're not going to fall into sin. Just, it's okay to listen to good music. Music is music, lyrics being what they are. Sometimes I don't understand at all what those guys are saying. I would rather listen to a paganized knucklehead who can write me under the table than an apostatized Christian any day. So that may be a weird way to end this, but parents, you're still filtering for your children. They don't just get access to the internet and Spotify at all. And at the same time, what you said, Joe, about a wide variety of styles and influences out there, go for it. Let your ears develop, and don't just listen to music. If you're a young musician, don't just listen to music that's within your own genre type. Open up your vocabulary to jazz, big band. Some of the greatest songs ever were written in the 30s and 40s and early 50s. Just wonderful music. You can inculcate that into the genre called rock, or even if it's not rock, you can put them in there.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm grateful to God that He's allowed me to keep doing music, and it does excite me. You've seen that meme of the couple laying in bed, and he's kind of looking over to one side, and the girl's worried about all these things that he's thinking about. What if it's this? And I'm over there with the thought balloon saying, man, I wish I could just get that snare to sit right in the mix.
All right. Well, I think we'll end with that. So
we'd better.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it. It's been good.
My honor. Thanks, Joseph. God bless.
Welcome back. That was a good interview, wasn't it? Hope you were encouraged. Well, let me end by encouraging you men to sing. Men, sing. In fact, the Bible uses the word sing 177 times. And in the Bible, men sing. Warriors sing. Kings sing. Fathers sing. Christ's disciples sing. Jesus Christ Himself sings. And God the Father sings. He's a mighty warrior who sings. Don't be afraid to sing. Don't be afraid to sing. In fact, go on Google and look up psalms and hymns and work on them. Just practice. Listen to them. Teach them to your children. Build up a hymnal in your mind, just a hymnal of songs that you know. You need to have a treasury of good songs. And let me tell you kind of the reason before it. You know, one of the last things Moses did before he died was to teach the people of Israel a song that they would use to remember him and to remember God, especially when they found themselves under discipline. You know, when we have gone into nursing homes, one of the things that we've noticed, you go in there and you think about how people have forgotten so much, their brains impacted by old age. They probably feel imprisoned, actually. And yet, we start singing some old hymns. We start singing old songs that we know that they know, and they just perk right up, right? Their brains become active again, and they are they're full of joy because they actually have in their own mind a hymnal of songs that they had sing, right? You know, the old ones like Amazing Grace, and when you start to sing these songs, it just starts coming out of them, and that imprisonment feeling that they have probably being in a nursing home kind of goes away because of the joy that they have in singing. If you will practice and develop songs, good singing, biblical, truthful songs, they will be a good and faithful friend to you to your very end of your life. And so, sing. Not singing is for pansies. Now, if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell to get notifications when we put out new content. Give us the thumbs up and like the video. Leave a comment. What are some of the songs that you like to sing? What are some of the things that you like to sing? So now, until next time, if you've not bowed your knee to Christ, then now's the time. Repent and believe. And if you have, this is our call as men. Build, fight, protect, lead. This is the Patriarchy.